I know it is tough because it was a dud of a season. But if you had to put your thinking caps on, who was the Cowboys' unsung hero of this past season? Who would like to start?
Man, I can't decide on something, Kevin, because was Javonte Williams a fair candidate for this?
Yeah.
Because I don't know if he got national credit. He got local credit a lot, but nationally, he didn't really. I think he was just like, oh, yeah, he's there as part of Dak, and George Pickens, that combination, and their woeful defense.
No, I thought about that one. I ultimately didn't pick him because he got a certain level of attention, but you're right. On the national level, he got very little attention whatsoever for what he did this season. So I ended up going a different direction, but I totally understand that pick.
Yeah, I'm probably looking at Cooper Beebe. Didn't get enough credit for how fantastic he played this year, so that's where I'm going to stick with Cooper Beebe. And again, he helped out Javonte Williams in that respect, too, up front.
Absolutely. See, and I agree with that, and that's why I actually kind of went combo here, and I hope this doesn't cheat the nature of the question, is I went Cooper Beebe and Brock Hoffman because obviously Beebe had to miss some time. Brock Hoffman got to see some time in at center as well. But everybody talks about how good the interior part of the Dallas Cowboys offensive line was, right? But I feel like so much of that ends up being about the all-pro awesomeness of Tyler Smith on the left side, and then the rookie campaign and leadership of Tyler Booker on the right side. But for so long, I feel like we've been wanting more stability. I mean, I guess post-Travis Frederick from the center position. And so I think Beebe and Hoffman were my combo on this question.
One of the things that I think is really interesting, because we talk about complete teams and we talk about the two teams that are in the title game right now, the big game, if you will, and it's two teams that were top four in offense and defense. They're really good teams because we talk complementary football. That term came with Mike McCarthy, I felt, because I kind of heard it with Jason Garrett, and it makes so much sense. It's not you're complimenting each other. It's if you do your job, it helps us do our job. Yeah. And whenever you look at this team this year, so many people, this is why this is actually a difficult thing to find and figure out. So many people rely on so many other people to do their jobs correctly, and it was inconsistent across the board. Even the offense. We pointed out where the offense's shortcomings this year, no matter how electric and explosive they were at times, the defense was a problem, and that created less wins. Well, then you go look at the microscopic parts of that, and you say, okay, well, this linebacker, on this play, this defensive lineman didn't do his job, got this linebacker pushed out. All those things add up to a big sum of bad. And that's what happened with the Cowboys this year, was inconsistencies at individual positions causing problems for other guys on the field as well. And so that's another thing that when it's difficult to look at this, because you want to be like Jake Ferguson, he had a good season, and then you're like, but these things missed here. And so it's very problematic because this team lacks the ability to be consistently good to help others out and hold each other accountable to what the play is supposed to be. And that's a frustrating thing right now, because there were some good players on this team. There were some good moments on this team, but not enough good moments for them to have success.
From the 2-1-4, George Pickens, because nobody knew how great of a wide receiver he was. Now, this one is interesting, and it kind of gets lumped into the Javonte Williams category, because I feel like around here we gave him all the love, and it feel like George Pickens got more national love by probably a pretty good amount than Javonte Williams. So I think George Pickens was a standout, but I also think he got the appropriate amount of positive feedback.
Yeah, let's look a little more
into... Except for being second-team All-Pro.
Yeah. Oh, man. Can you even believe it? It had nothing to do with his on-field play.
No, I disagree with that so much.
Let's look a little deeper into George Pickens and kind of refit the trajectory and the story and the narrative on that. When the trade happened, I think every single person was like, the athletic, the freak that he is, this dude can do everything. Was he maxed out in Pittsburgh? Was he used appropriately? We didn't think he was completely used appropriately, and I had question marks about some moments when I would see him disappear. Go look at the Cincinnati game his last year there in Pittsburgh. That was a moment that I watched and I was like, that wasn't his best game. And so I think we were all like, okay, if he can play at a certain level, this is a great trade, because you knew out of college what he was at Georgia. Then he shows up here, and early in the season, it looked like, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, they wanted to make a point that CeeDee Lamb was their number one receiver.
Yeah,
and
I can see
Pickens,
that.
It kind of got lost a little bit. Pickens was also there, and then CeeDee Lamb got hurt. And then they said, well, we got to go to Pickens. And Pickens did what he's really good at. He did great slants. He did great deep balls. He was electrifying. And that we all knew that was capable. That was possible. The question mark we had about him was, can he survive the season without causing a problem? That was it. Like that was the only thing. He had a couple of bumps here and there, and at the end of the season, it turns out they found a way to use both receivers effectively and still have a positive running game. So
I have a question about that. Do you think, I know you said like CeeDee Lamb is the clear number one. Is there any part of you that thinks they kind of slow played it with him because of what you just mentioned? Because specifically they're like, let's just see how he does when we slow play it. And we're like, yeah, you'll get this, you'll get that.
I don't know. I think they wanted to make it like, because the question started happening like, oh, there's two number ones on this team, and that's a grand idea. Like interchangeable dudes on any given play, you're like, hey, yeah, you're the first look on this play, and if you balance that out, as you said, for balance's sake, then you don't like that so much. But if it naturally happens that way, that's a positive thing for the game, because that means that you're forcing defenses to question everything that they're doing every time they line up, instead of them disguising to make you question what you're doing. So no, I don't think that was the case. I don't, Kevin. I appreciate that question. I think the Cowboys they were concerned about optics with CeeDee Lamb having just gotten that contract and wanted to make sure that he felt like he was still the leader in that room. It looked like by the end of the season, both of those guys felt like they were leading the wide receiver room together, and that was something that they felt they lacked a couple years ago whenever they felt like there was no leader in that locker room and CeeDee Lamb was still young and had to step into the role.
From the 972, they also went with Javonte. From the 214, it was Micah Parsons. You know what? That is an interesting way of looking at that, and I kind of feel like Jerry Jones might feel that way as well. Alec, I want to go to you for Unsung Hero, and then I want to get to one or two more of these fan texts that have keyed in on one individual player.
I feel like this guy did get, I'd say, a fair amount of love, but especially nationally, you're not going to see it just because of the nature of the position. But I do think the expectations that we levy on rookie offensive linemen here in Dallas are usually too high. But Tyler Booker exceeded all of those expectations for me, because he was so consistent. He was available. The leadership that you mentioned earlier in this segment, like he stepped in and he was plug and play. I did not expect him to be plug and play in terms of a leadership role or on the field production, but I think that he was such a sound piece on that offensive line and a major part of the success of Javonte Williams, and why this offense was so good is you never pointed at him. He was never the mark, and it feels like the rookie offensive lineman at some point, even Will Campbell in these playoffs for the Patriots, is getting pointed at like he's been the mark on certain plays. I can't remember, and I'm sure there's at least a few, but I can't remember off the dome where there was that one play that Tyler Booker was the mark on a bad play.
Yeah,
Kevin, I have two things that I wanted to. One on the offensive line front. Like, don't you feel excited that you have a guard on one side, a guard on the other, that both have really high expectations, high level of play, and like they're going to hold their offensive line accountable to that, and the expectation across that is if we can get the rest of the offensive line to play to the accountability they play to, this is going to be a good offensive line for the future.
No, I agree with you, and I am hoping that there's not any hiccup whatsoever about where one of those offensive linemen actually plays and what their actual position is. Now, one of the reasons that this question came up was NFL.com. They listed Ryan Fenoy, hence the audio, we came back with as the unsung hero this past season. You get it from the 214. I see it from the 972 as well. I'll just tell you this. I think Ryan Fenoy took another step, but here's the reason why I didn't pick him, and I don't agree with that choice from NFL.com, which is okay. We don't all have to agree. You guys might disagree with my selection. Ryan Fenoy had 20 catches for 241 yards, about half his production in the final 4 games that they played, and the Cowboys lost all 4 of them. So I feel like a lot of that production was turned up, maybe outside of one game, when the Cowboys were essentially eliminated already from the playoffs. So that doesn't change what I think about him going forward, and I do think that he could be a big deal for this team. But a lot of his production came at a time when you're like, yeah, we're pretty much done with the season, so let's try this out.
The 13 target 9 catch game for 115 yards and a touchdown was, I think it's interesting because he already had a game earlier in the year where he had 114 yards on 6 catches. Now, he floated through a bunch of inconsistency in between those games, right? Like, you look at that and you're like 30, 0, 7, 12. You know, you're just kind of like,
that's to be expected.
Yeah, you're the 3rd, 4th receiver on the team at times, and if your offense isn't uber productive, you kind of get lost and forgotten in that. However, that night in Detroit, and Kevin, that was on a massive stage. So this is one of the reasons that everybody knows Ryan Fenoy's name right now, is because it was on a massive stage on a Thursday night football game when Amon-Ra St. Brown wasn't supposed to play, and the Cowboys, it's all on the line still. You know, all those things were still there. And Ryan Fenoy goes out there and has a very productive game. Why? Because it felt like Pickens wasn't reliable in that game at points. You saw a couple plays where you were questioning, and even the next morning, you're getting the, hey, that wasn't his best game. He said it to me. You know, all that going on. So a guy steps up in a big moment where he's needed. And I think that's one of the reasons people would float and navigate towards him. And I think also, we see this a lot. You and I discuss this a lot. The hope and expectation for him to grow and flourish. I think that's what a lot of people are kind of pinning on him, is he'll get better and he might become that next dude for you. And I'm hopeful for that.
Oh, for sure. Now, in other Cowboys news, we have a variety of different things to tackle. Kevontae Turpin did replace Rashid Shaheed in the Pro Bowl games, though I don't know if all Pro Bowl game selections were invalidated or downgraded after Shedeur Sanders made the cut yesterday. And then we've been preparing for this. The Cowboys moved on from a handful of coaches yesterday, and I think, leading the way, although it also includes defensive pass game coordinator and safeties coach Andre Curtis, secondaries cornerbacks coach David Overstreet II, and linebackers coach Dave Bergonzi were all let go by the organization. The marquee one among the group that we've talked about quite a bit was Cowboys defensive line coach Aaron Whitecotton, who was also interviewing to be the DC for the Cowboys. He left the organization to become the Titans defensive run game coordinator / defensive line coach. Now, was that decision made of its own accord and he thought that was a better job, better spot, or was he told that he was going to be let go one way or another? Possibly, but some Cowboys coaches moving on down the line under, or I guess not under, new DC Christian Parker.
Do you like seeing, does it look like he has autonomy here to make the decisions of who he wants on his staff?
Yes, very much. Because, look, if nothing else, I get it if you're like, hey, I want to keep this coach or I want to keep that coach. But, I mean, just think about the ones that we went over. And, unfortunately, it focused in on secondary, cornerback, safety, and linebackers. I feel like we all thought defensively those were catastrophic for the Cowboys this past season. So I can't say I'm particularly surprised of any of them moving on down the road. And then names to keep an eye out on: Steelers outside linebacker coach Denzel Martin was interviewed for the same job with the Cowboys, and then the Cowboys also interviewed Eagles assistant linebacker coach Ronell Williams, who was the Cowboys nickel cornerback coach in 2023, and then they interviewed from the Vikings, defensive line coach Marcus Dixon, who was with Parker in Denver. So take a look at how the next hires might go, and you made an noise because nickel cornerbacks coach with the Cowboys in 2023.
Yeah, and then, kind of the idea, we just discussed the idea of how Christian Parker's defense might look. We obviously have a whole offseason before we get to training camp to be able to see that. But imagining that it's going to look similar to what we're seeing, that would be an interesting addition because Kevin, here's one thing. I'm sorry, I got to take another second on this. Ted Wynn suggested in his article there was another person that suggested in that nickel cornerback might become a specialized coaching position.
Sure.
That it will become like it's instead of having a bunch like Broadus is like, dude, they have 50 coaches on this team. Yeah, and they might be looking at this going, hey, we need because this guy has to be with linebackers and secondary and all these different things. We might have to have a specialized position to bring all that together. That might be something to keep an eye on. But yeah, I like that he's interviewing some fresh idea people for what he wants.